Hello, my name is Samuel Hyman. I'm a PhD student from the University of Manchester, and I'm going to talk to you today about the impact of urban air pollution on human health. I'm currently on placement at the University of Copenhagen, and this is a picture of me and the department enjoying a very rare moment of sunshine in Copenhagen. My PhD is split into 3 projects, and after receiving training at the Aerosol CDC, I have focused 2 parts on environmental epidemiology, looking at pollution in cities and linking it to health outcomes. And my 3rd project, which is just starting up now, is a toxicology project looking at non-exhaust emissions and in vitro lung models. I've spent my time between the University of Manchester and the University of Copenhagen. So I'm going to start by talking about my first project, which was the association between long-term exposure to air pollution and COVID-19 severity, which was a cohort study in Greater Manchester. This paper has been published last year, and you can find it online at the link below. So this is a really nice picture to start my talk. You can see that Manchester is a very industrial city, and this here is the largest industrial area in the centre of a city in Europe. And it's called the Trafford Centre. So it's a really interesting city to study kind of exposure to air pollution, and actually it's just overtaken London and Birmingham this year as the most polluted city in the UK, which it certainly shouldn't, because it's much smaller than both of those cities. So what is air pollution? Air pollution is the release of pollutants into the atmosphere from natural or human activities. The WHO estimates that ambient air pollution leads to 4.2 million deaths per year. There are many fractions, including particulate matter, NO2, ozone, SO2, and benzene. Concentrations of primary air pollutants can vary both temporally and spatially, but are typically higher closer to the source. An example of this is with NO2, which we can say primarily comes from vehicle emissions within a city, whereas something like industrial kind of emissions will have a higher proportion of benzene and potentially SO2, depending on what the industry is. So this is a nice slide from the Office for National Statistics, and it just highlights that air pollution can cause and worsen health effects in all individuals, and particularly society's most vulnerable populations. So since the WHO's last 2005 global update, there has been a marked increase of evidence that shows how air pollution affects different aspects of health. For that reason, and after a systematic review, the WHO has actually decreased all of its AQGs downwards quite substantially. So you can see for fine particulate matter, it's gone from 10 to 5 micrograms per metre squared, and NO2 we've gone down from 30 to 10. So exposure to different air pollutants may favour the pathogenesis of viral respiratory infections such as SARS-CoV-2 by perturbing the immune system, allowing increased viral entry into cells, and increasing the risk of major respiratory and cardiometabolic diseases. This figure here depicts how target organs and main diseases that COVID-19 in blue and air pollution in green, how they overlap and what they share. So ecological studies have shown an association between air pollution and increased COVID-19 incidence and severity, but there is a lack of individual level studies to support these findings. This figure here is from one of the first ecological studies looking at air pollution and COVID-19 severity. And it's a very heavily cited study and is a great starting point for future studies. So our study included all first positive cases of COVID-19 with a PCR test in Greater Manchester. And we wanted to look at the association between exposure to ambient outdoor levels of air pollution and COVID-19 severity in a retrospective cohort study. We accounted for potential confounders such as age, sex, BMI, ethnicity, smoking, population density and deprivation score, and we also looked at effect modification by a range of comorbidities which were also related to severe COVID outcomes, such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension and COPD. Our air pollution data came from DEFRA, and it was 2019 annual averages. We did a very subtle tweak to make this data more suitable to look at the spatial kind of differences within a city such as Greater Manchester. So as I said before, Manchester is one of the most polluted cities in the UK, with new data showing that it might be the most polluted and have overtaken London and Birmingham. I wanted to start kind of thinking about where the pollution is coming from when we kind of visualize it spatially. So this down here is an area in Tameside, which has some of the highest concentrations of PM2.5 and benzene. And in this area, we have some two motorways that run through, actually some of the slowest moving motorways in the UK. We have a river here, which is recorded as having the most plastic, the highest concentration of plastic found in a waterway anywhere in the world, which the newspaper source attributes to the industrial areas in this particular part of Manchester. We have big industrial parks, and this is a view into Manchester from I guess the Peak District, and you can kind of see a lot of these industrial buildings kind of interspersed with residential areas. This is an area where DEFRA predicted there were high concentrations of SO2. In this area we actually have, this is the Trafford Centre that I mentioned earlier. We have a lot of shipping. Actually, the government's plan is to increase shipping in this area post-Brexit. We also have busy roads, which will contribute to more PM2.5 and NO2. So in this study, these are the covariates that I used. I built 3 models. First one was demographics, the second one was model 1 plus the individual level covariates, and model 3 was model 2 plus the area level covariates. And these were the effect modifiers that I used. So I used some of the covariates as effect modifiers as well to look at the differences between groups. These are our main results. And we can see COVID hospitalisation here and COVID-19 mortality. And we see generally very significant positive associations with all pollutants, with the exception of NO2, which becomes non-significant with mortality, and ozone, which almost seems to have a protective effect, but that's not really the case when we run our 2 pollutant models. This is the reason we see this is because ozone and NO2 interact with each other in a city, and this is kind of expected. But everything else, we see significant positive associations. We see some of the strongest associations with benzene and SO2, which one could argue are industrial pollutants compared to NO2. So the associations between air pollution and COVID-19 severity are significantly modified by certain groups. So we see that if you are older, you're at a greater risk. If you have a higher BMI, you're also at a greater risk. If you're a smoker, and if you have certain comorbidities. I'm now going to talk to you a bit about Project 3, which is where the experimental work has just begun in April 2024, and we're going to be looking at non-exhaust emissions and in vitro lung models. We're going to be focusing on tyre wear particles and brake wear particles, but for this talk I'm primarily going to talk to you about tyre wear particles to keep it simple. Car tyre wear particles are predicted to be the biggest atmospheric source of microplastics. Tyre wear particles are generated mostly in the coarse mode, so that's above 1 micrometer, by shear forces between the tread and the road pavement, or fine mode, below 1 micrometer from evaporative emissions due to the heating of the tyre followed by condensation and coagulation. Tyre wear particles generated by shear forces are generally elongated in shape and have an uneven and compositionally complex surface. Particulates from non-exhaust emissions are woefully understudied. It is debatable how much they contribute to the inhalable fraction. However, it is likely that tyre wear contributes more to PM10, whereas brake wear will contribute more to PM2.5. Looking at the ultrafine particle number may be more important than mass for toxicological studies. This figure down below is from a study in California where they've taken samples of ambient air from the side of a highway, and they find a significant contribution from tyre wear and brake wear. They use quite primitive markers, but I still think it's a nice indication. And the figure on the top is just showing that there's a big difference in tyre wear and brake wear particles produced based on the size of a car. These are tailpipe kind of emission cars. However, the research kind of shows that smaller electric cars are probably kind of comparable to large tailpipe vehicles because of their heavy battery packs. So they're producing more tyre wear particles than an equivalent sized tailpipe emission vehicle. So the size range of tyre wear particles can range from 10 nanometers to several hundred micrometers. And this is a nice slide just to highlight that we get variations in size from things such as road surface, tyre brand, braking, accelerating, cornering, and additives. So there are numerous constituents of tyre wear, which are added for several reasons, primarily due to safety, performance, and durability. The composition is currently unregulated and often patented, so can vary considerably. This will change in the next few years, but at the moment it is currently unregulated. So previous studies have used a number of ways to generate tyre and brake wear particles, such as a road simulator, pin-on-disc, on-road collection, or a dynamometer. And this here is a picture of a road simulator in Sweden, and this is probably the most efficient way to generate kind of high kind of masses of tyre particles. So tyre road wear particle toxicity in mammalian models is currently limited, and in vitro and in vivo studies have shown that oxidative stress and inflammation are the main mechanisms underlying the toxicity. In this study, we will focus on simple in vitro models to further investigate the toxicity of tyre and brake wear particles. The work will be conducted at the University of Copenhagen in the Department of Environmental Health, and I'm working with a toxicology group that focus on looking at the health effects of particles from pollution. The experiments began in April 2024 and are expected to last around a year. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. As I said, my focus is primarily toxicology at the moment. However, I am still having further training in environmental epidemiology, and I hope that some new projects will start up shortly and I can work on that alongside the toxicology.